I have over a decade of clinical experience of carrying out microneedling, not just for myself, but for my patients as well. And I'm going to try and put together all of that experience today to give you what I am going to try and make my most in-depth and detailed video on microneedling possible. I'm going to go through things like the DIY accessibility, the risks, the tools, live techniques, realistic expectations, the aftercare, the sourcing of tools, and your microneedling questions, which you have given me specifically for this video, of which there are a lot. And I'm also going to go through things like the serums, the skincare that you can use afterwards, the timing, the frequency, specific skin concerns, hygiene advice, and post-treatment aftercare as well. And I'm even going to be doing some live dermarolling in this video so you can see roughly what I'm talking about as well. Let's get straight into it. As you can see, I've got a laptop over here. This is just a load of notes so I don't miss anything because you have asked me a lot of questions for this. The first topic I'm going to go through here is needle size versus depth. Now, I know that that sounds a little bit kind of, well, don't they mean the same thing? Needle size and depth, and why don't you just say needle size? Well, there is a reason. The size doesn't necessarily equate to the depth that you reach. And this is one of the things that people don't realize. So I will go through that in this video as well. The first thing I'm going to go through is the needle size though. Now, you have to understand that it's not possible for me to see your skin watching this through a YouTube comment or from me recording this. So like all the advice here is not for you individually. It is education to try and help you figure out your individual depth. And so the depth of the needle is dependent on the thickness of the skin. And I'll explain it to you this way. Let's pretend there is a particular structure you would like to reach somewhere in the skin. And your skin, let's pick round numbers, your skin is, let's say, 2 millimeters thick, just for example's sake. And the structure we would like to hit is exactly halfway down. So we know that that's a millimeter from the surface. And if you want to hit that, your needle size therefore has to be a millimeter, assuming it corresponds directly to the depth actually reached. Whereas let's say your skin is 1 millimeter thick, but you want to hit the same structure for the same reason, for the same problem. But because your skin is half the size, the needle size needs to be half as well. Now, that should be pretty obvious. I know it's not difficult to understand, but think about that particular thought process when it's in the context of someone saying, what is the best depth? You've got no idea. The depth, the needle size, the depth you reach are a function of your skin thickness. This is why, you know, there are people that say use this depth or that use that depth on a particular video. People will try it and then they might comment and say, well, this didn't work for me or made me worse off. Yeah, because it's depth, it's individual skin dependent. And I know that's not helpful for a lot of people, but it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I am going to talk about specific needle sizes and specific depths, but I want you to understand why these particular sizes are chosen, and you should try and work out, is that right for you? Some of you may not be able to, and I appreciate that, but that's why you need to seek advice before doing something like this, because microneedling is fantastic. It can do incredible things. It can create large amounts of elastic fibers in the skin, but there are precautions you could take, that you should take, that there are risks, and professionally I have to say it's not always safe for every single person. So skin thickness dependent is my answer to needle size, but I'm going to go through two particular sizes or depths that we reach. And these are commonly used. I'm not saying they're the best, but they are commonly used. So the two I'm going to talk about is 0.2 millimeters and 1 millimeter, 1.0 millimeters. Now, these are very, very crucial depths. And you have to understand why. Okay, there's a little bit of education here and using anatomy. Your skin is essentially made up of two sections, the epidermis and the dermis, according to what most people teach. However, I believe that's too simplistic. For me, I think there's the epidermis and the dermis, correct? But you really do have to talk about the dermoepidermal junction in between as well. And the reason is when something breaches a dermoepidermal junction, then you have this process of wound healing that begins because of what's contained in the dermoepidermal junction that is then traumatized, which then triggers a biochemical chain reaction that creates or that starts the wound healing process. So for example, sometimes when we run our fingers over a piece of wood, we find a splinter that goes in. It doesn't go in very far and you can just pull it out. it goes in such a superficial amount or a shallow amount that it just stays in the top layer of skin. It doesn't breach the dermo-epidermal junction and go into the layer below, which is a dermis. Because it stays in the epidermis and the DEJ is intact, you don't get that wound healing response. You just get a bit of a, a tear in that upper layer and nothing's happened, and that's it. So when you look at microneedling, if you use something like 0.2 millimeters, you are not breaching that dermo-epidermal junction, which I'll now refer to as the DEJ going forward. So if you're not breaching the DEJ, you're not really creating that wound healing response. And that's very, very key. The two sizes I've said here are 0.2 and 1 mil. 0.2 is not going to breach that DEJ for the most part anyway, and I will explain that in more detail. Whereas the 1 mil typically is going to. So you have, the same thing that you're doing, but because the needle size is, less than a millimeter difference, you are having a completely different biological and physiological effect in the skin. So why do we have these two depth sizes, which, remember, I'm not saying they're the best or you should do them. These are commonly used in my clinical practice. Well, at 0.2 mil, I'll talk about that one first. You're not breaching the DEJ, so what's the point? I thought microneedling was supposed to create lots of collagen. Microneedling can create fibers and proteins like collagen and elastin and others, but it doesn't mean that it will. So you see, if you use 0.2, you achieve a different effect. That creates a prick, a slight funnel creation on the top layer of the skin. And think about it this way, when we use skincare, okay, we want the ingredients in that skincare to go into our skin so it can be used by our cells. And then we have the effects that we have, the improvement in skin, whatever you want to call it. But of all the skincare that you rub into your skin, how much do you actually think penetrates? It varies on skin to skin, obviously. But if you look at a paper like Stahl 2012, I believe, I think they found something like, and I could be wrong on this because I haven't read the paper in a while, I think it's around 7 to 8% in terms of penetration. So most of it actually isn't really being used. Now imagine how much better your skin could be if your skincare could penetrate way more. That's where 0.2 millimeters comes in. If you use that, then what's happening is your skincare is penetrating up to 10 times more than you could get 70 to 80% penetration based on needle size rate around 0.2 mil and doing it for a couple of minutes, which is what they found in that particular study. So 0.2 is something that is used, that can be used every single day. And I'm going to talk about frequency and timing as well. But 0.2 is done simply to increase skincare penetration. It's not designed to create vast amounts of protein output from the cells. And so that makes it very, very safe because you're not breaching their DEJ. Then you have the 1 mil, which clearly is going to initiate that wound healing process because it's breaking through the DEJ. When you use that 1 mil, then you're going to get all these positive things that you've probably read about and heard about when it comes to microneedling, like it's going to create loads of collagen. Yes, that's absolutely fine. And to an extent, it is going to. It's not going to create it to an infinite amount, but you can institute that response. And so 1 mil is something that I use typically in clinic. I use a lot of time, not all the time. Please remember that. Sometimes we will use less, sometimes we'll use more. It depends on the clinical situation at hand. But again, I'm going to talk about these two here. So the size is typically one of those. Now, there are studies that have looked at things like 1 mil at particular usages and things like that, and they have found vast amounts of collagen increase. For example, Aust 2008 from Matthias Aust, a German physician. He is very well known in the microneedling world because he's got a lot of experience in it. And when you look at that, they use these lengths and they get tremendous results. I'll talk about how to mirror that at home as well. So 1 mil seems to be very good with decent amount of clinical evidence for that particular reason. Now, it does vary based on the tool that you're using, again, which is something I'm going to cover in this video. I've got my notes for that as well. So if you have a particular skin problem or skin condition, you might need to alter these things. Maybe you don't need to alter 0.2, depending on where you're going, and I will talk about that, but you may need to alter the 1 mil. But like I said, typically they're the most commonly used ones in my clinical practice. And now the depth that you reach doesn't necessarily correspond to the needle that you use. So for example, if you have a needle size of, I'm going to pick a round number here, let's say 0.5 millimeters, it doesn't mean that needle is actually going to reach 0.5 millimeters down into the skin. For example, if you take me as a model here, on this area of my skin, you've got this the cheekbone, the zygomatic arch. It's kind of sticking out a bit, so you've got great access to it. And when I roll over, I'm probably going to reach exactly 0.5, because the needle is 0.5. Here, I clearly have some facial hair. It's not that thick. It's quite thin, but obviously some people it might be a little bit thicker. These are going to act as a sort of sponge that restricts the penetration of the tool that you're using, potentially, depending on which tool. So you have to take that into account. So if the structure you need to reach is, let's say 0.5 mil under the skin, but it's in an area where there's a lot of hair, you probably need to experiment in going up slightly in order to reach that particular thickness, that particular depth. This is something you discuss with whoever it is that's supervising your needling, if you are getting it supervised. If you're not, you're playing a bit of a lottery. As well as that, depending on the curvature of the area that you're treating. So, for example, if you look at someone like the cheeks, some people have quite hollowed-in cheeks. And depending on the tool that you're using, it's very difficult sometimes to get the angulation correct. And also, if there's nothing underneath, like for example, here I've got a hard cheekbone, here I've got the hard frontal bone in the forehead, here where it's a bit more soft, it may be difficult to actually get the penetration to the full size of the actual needle. So these are areas where you might see slightly different results, not necessarily because you're doing things wrong, but because you need to just alter it's take into account the anatomy of where you're actually treating. This comes, with experience. Certainly when I treat my patients for this, I give them all that experience and I teach them exactly how to do it. But that's a rough guide in terms of size. So most of the time you only need 2 sizes. And I know that's possibly an odd thing to hear, because most people say, do this particular depth for this area, that particular depth for that area, etc. But it depends. It's very, very variable. But typically my patients get given 2 particular sizes to use. And the 0.2, assuming that's right for them, we will use that not just for skincare penetration, but also in particular areas, which I will demonstrate today as well. So the next thing I've got is needling frequency. So how often should I microneedle, essentially? Now, it depends on the needle size that we're using, which in turn depends on your individual clinical presentation, your skin thickness, your conditions, etc., etc. But again, I'm going to stick with the example of using the 0.2 and the 1 millimeter. Now, let's start with that 0.2 millimeters. Like I said, that doesn't breach the DEJ. And if you've skipped ahead to this point and you don't know what the DEJ is, please, genuinely for your safety, do watch the whole thing if you can. But because you're not breaching the DEJ and you're not initiating that wound healing response, the thing with 0.2 is it's an incredibly safe depth to use. I have patients that are happy to use that every single day, multiple times a day, if they want. And what they are doing is essentially using that just before skincare. And if you apply your skincare twice a day, you can do this twice a day, because there's no harm, depending on where you're using it, again, which I will cover here. Let's say you're doing it on your face, generally here, not the eyes, then there's no harm, because you're not creating that wound healing response. So 0.2, the frequency can be multiple times a day. And of course, if you're doing less than that, if you're a particular patient of mine, and I've told you for your skin 0.1 would be better, no problem. You're still going to have the same result. You're not breaching that DEJ, depending on where you're treating, until you can do it multiple times a day. It's really not going to harm you whatsoever. Next up, the 1 millimeter. So again, pretending this is the depth that's right for you, the 1 millimeter is going to create that wound healing response. So you have to then understand how that process actually plays out. I'm not going to go through that here because it's probably too deep for today, but there is a process. And if you keep needling before that process is finished, you can actually make things worse off. Think about it really simply in this way. If you go to the gym and work out, going to the gym doesn't make you stronger. Going to the gym doesn't make you fitter. It makes you weaker, because it breaks your muscle fibers. The recovery after the gym is what causes repair and leaves you in a stronger state. So recovery makes you stronger, gym makes you weaker. So you need to, injure yourself, break the muscle fiber in the gym, then wait for the recovery response to finish, the adaptation, the growth. Then you can go to the gym again and lift a bit more. That entire cycle makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure it's not news to anyone, but needling has to be thought of in the same perspective. You have your needles going into the skin, they do X, Y, Z, whatever they're going to do, institute that wound healing response, and now it's left your skin in a worse state. It's left you weaker, shall we say, from going to the gym, but now you need the recovery in order to actually repair all the damage that you've done, and create, all the changes that you want to have better skin than what you started with. So if you needle too frequently, you are just going to make the skin worse for that reason. And so 1 mil, a lot of people will point to the fact that, certain enzymes come into play, certain cycles happen when it comes to wound healing, and you should only do it, let's say, once a month or something like that. And I fully understand the logic behind that, looking at all the processes, the biology that happens, and seeing how long it takes to finish and then doing it again. That's perfectly reasonable, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's all of that, and then there's clinical experience as well. And I have to say, in clinical experience of all the years, over a decade that I've been doing this, I tend to go for once a week for that. And I've never had a single patient with a problem. And I will say this, the person that invented microneedling, Dr. Des Fernandez, a physician, a plastic surgeon, in fact, I think, from South Africa, like this shirt I've got over here, Dr. Des Fernandez, he also goes for that roughly 1 week interval. And I know this because I've spoken to him about it. Occasionally he does go a little bit quicker. I think the quickest he does is once every 4 days, but you have to be very careful with that. And that is only in very, very specific situations, but ideally it should be once a week. And even, in the studies, I think Zita 2014, I believe they used once a week as well to get the results, the great results that they got. So yes, theories and everything will say do it less frequently, but in clinical practice and all these years, Des Fernandez has been doing it since the late 90s. Once a week has worked absolutely fine. So typically for that kind of depth, that 1 millimeter, I will stick with once a week, and I've never had an issue. But that's based on the way the needling is done, which is again something that I am going to include in this video. So please bear that into mind. The frequency of that 1 mil is not for all different types of needling for all patients. I'm going to explain why I do it once a week later in this video. If you do it differently, maybe it's right. Maybe you should only do it once a month. So please take that into account. And then after that, the next session I want to talk about is a microneedling pen versus a dermaroller versus a needling stamp or a derma stamp or whatever you want to call it. Now, right off the bat, I'll say there is a video I made on my channel comparing a roller to a pen, an automatic pneumatic pen. I'll link that in the description if you want something a lot more detailed. But I am going to go through it in a little bit more of a summary format today and also bring in the stamp. I'll start with the stamp, in fact. So a stamp is essentially just a block. It can be square, circular, whatever you want. And the needles are fixed. And you have to walk it around your face like this. Now, that's very, very safe as long as you're not being stupid with it, because you can't get too many penetrations because it's manual, and most likely it's not going to drag across the skin because you're having to manually lift it up every single time. And frankly, I don't think there's anything majorly wrong with the stamp. It's just very slow. If you need to treat an area with quite a lot of needling, it's going to take a very, very long time, hence why I don't do it. So, but it's okay if you do want to. If you think you want to start off light for a beginner, by all means. But again, there's so few penetrations, you might not actually see anything, and you might think, no, microneedling doesn't work, without realizing that actually it's the tool you're using that's not very effective for you. So for me, really, it's between a dermaroller and an automatic pen. There are many different brands of these pens. The rollers really in the patent, I think the rollers were created by Michel Pistor in 1952. So the patent really isn't there anymore, and anyone can just make these. Hence why there are so many on the market that you can get for very, very cheap on Amazon, for instance. In fact, I'll leave a link in the description for the exact roller that I personally use for myself if I'm ever going to do it. I don't do it that much now, but also for my patients, where I send my patients to. So when you look at these things, the pen versus the roller, there's a lot to say, and I have said it in that video, but I'll be succinct here. First thing to say is the pen is going to create many, many more penetrations. That could, leave thousands and thousands of penetrations into the skin in a minute, whereas the roller is going to be nowhere near that. And the issue I have with that alone is the level of inflammation that the pen creates. So if you are doing 1 millimeter, like we've spoken about already in the previous section, when you're doing 1 millimeter with that many penetrations, you're going to most likely create a heck of a lot of bleeding, heck of a lot of redness, and most importantly, a heck of a lot of inflammation. And the more inflammation you have, the longer that the healing is going to be, the more time it takes. And so if you're using a pen to do 1 mil, So a lot of people will say, we can only do that once a month or once a fortnight. I tend to agree. I think that's perfectly spot on. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But when you use a roller, you're not creating that level of inflammation. Hence why clinically we go with weekly if we need to. And I only use a roller. The inventor of needling only ever uses a roller. I only use a roller. One of the most experienced needlers in the world, Lawton Setterfield, I believe he only uses a roller. There's reasons for this, right? The people with the most experience, not that I'm on their level, obviously, but those people with the most experience, hint, hint, they all use a roller. And one of the reasons is the level of inflammation. I have seen patients who have had needling with pens have overtreatment. The skin has been overtreated and it's just awful. It's really, really bad. And it's left them with scars and things as well. You can't really do that with a roller because it's not penetrating enough. It's not automatic. It's not pneumatic. It's not electronic. And that's a really, really key difference. And that allows you to treat at different frequencies. As well as that, a pen, let's be frank, most clinics are going to use a pen because if you go to a clinic, you pay for it. A roller you can do at home, so the clinic makes no profit if they advise on that. Forgive me for being cynical, but I think that's a big factor. The way I do needling in clinic, I use a roller, but I ask the patient to bring a friend. That friend will video the entire session of me doing the needling for them. And then that patient, they watch in a mirror as well, and they learn how to do it. And then they've got the video to watch back. And they only pay for one session because once they see me do it and they've got the video, they can then do it for the rest of their life for free. That's how I do needling in clinic. And they only pay once, they only see me once, and that's it. But the session is not cheap, but it's cheaper than ever paying again for the rest of your life because you never have to. It's free for the next few decades or however many remaining decades you have. And so when people say a pen is better, you've got to take that into account. Is there a financial gain there? Is there a financial bias? Now, even if there is, some people may genuinely mean it. Fair enough. I get it. But I think that's one of the main reasons. And then people also talk about the safety, and they're right to. I think the safety is an important aspect. A derm stamp, like I said, I think is very, very safe because there's not a lot you can do with it, really. With a pen and a roller, I think people get it the wrong way around. They say that, a roller can drag. How can it drag? When you've got a circular barrel and all the needles are, pointing around the clock face, it can't drag because when the needles are pointing outwards from each other, it grips the skin. And you can actually see this if you watch a video of those needles, they do grip the skin. You can't drag. Whereas a pen drags. Now, I was having dinner in, I think it was Copenhagen not too long ago with some distributors. And I was telling them I use a roller, and they said, "Oh, that a roller, you get all these drags and things, and you get the scars." I said, "Well, have you ever seen one from a roller?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Have you seen it from a pen?" And she said, "Yeah, I have." "So why are you saying rollers create these drags and tears?" I don't know. It's a myth. Like if you go online and search, microneedling, scars, tears, drags, or whatever, they're all done with a pen. Like if you do it with a roller, it's because you've massively misused it. So it's not the roller, it's the way you're using it. You see, when the roller grips, it rolls over, so there's no drag or tear. Whereas with the pen, the needle's only going up and down like this. But then because the whole pen containing the needle is going side to side, that up and down movement of the needle combined with the lateral movement makes it go like this, diagonally. And so when it's doing that and it's in the skin, it's going sideways before it's even come up because it's going like this. That's why it can catch the skin and you get these lines at times, these tears, these drags, whatever you want to call them. You don't get that with a roller. So in terms of safety, you don't get the tears that pens do with a roller, and you don't get the risk of overtreatment with a roller, which you do get with a pen. You don't have anywhere near as much inflammation with a roller as you do with a pen. So how is a roller not as safe as a pen? Like, I've never, ever in over a decade had an issue with overtreatment or too much inflammation or scarring or tearing with a roller. And I believe last time I spoke to Dr. Des Fernandez, the most experienced needler in the world, he was exactly the same. Des, if you're watching this, please comment below so to attest to that if you wouldn't mind. So for me, I always use a roller. Like I said, never had an issue, never had a risk, and I have no financial gain to say that. Like people pay me once and then it's free. People that say a pen is better, especially clinics, yeah, they're going to make a lot of money from you coming in and doing all that. And in terms of the outcome, what about the results? Not just the safety. Well, when you use a pen, because of the level of treatment and the amount of treatment, the amount of penetrations in the skin, the amount of inflammation, etc., etc., like I said, the frequency has to come down. But because the roller doesn't do that, you can needle more frequently. So in a 1 month time span, you do that 1 mil with the pen and you're probably not going to do it again. But with the roller, you might be able to do it 4 times once a week. And so if you look at the end of the month, you've had a lower risk profile, so possibly even more of an outcome in terms of the proteins that are created in the skin, like collagen as an example. So I find in practical terms, the outcome is actually better with a roller because you then take time and frequency into account, which you can't if you just compare the instruments. So that's why I use a roller. I always recommend a roller. You're going to be much safer at home doing this if you're going to. Um, Not a lot can change my mind because I've been doing it for a very, very long time. And like I said, the most experienced people in the world are doing exactly the same. If you want to use a pen, there are many, many brands out there. What I would say to you is it doesn't really matter that much about the brand. Just look at the quality of the needles. Look at how you replace the cartridges and things like that. Other than that, it's down to you. It's down to the user and not the tool itself that makes the biggest difference. In terms of a roller, which one? I don't stick with a brand. I just find one that I, have decent quality needles and decent quality grip and everything, and that's it. I spend probably less than £10. In the US dollars, it's probably going to be about $10, maybe 11, 12 euros, something along those lines in parts of Europe and whatever currency you have. So it's very, very cheap. The stamp is probably going to be around the same price as a roller if you're going to use it, but honestly, I don't see much point. If you want to use a low number of penetrations, just use a roller, but go really slow and maybe do one pass or something like that. It's where you'll get the same result as doing a stamp. It's very, very easy. So I hope that's answered a lot of questions in terms of which tools to use and where to get them as well. Like I said, I will leave links in the description, affiliate links in the description to the rollers that I personally use as well. Which roller? When you first get your roller, what you need to do if you want to decide whether it's a good one or not is look at things like the connection between the barrel and the actual handle. Sometimes these barrels will come off, and so you just buy a replacement barrel instead of the whole thing. So the whole thing may be a little bit more expensive initially, but then when you just need to replace the barrel, each subsequent one can be cheaper than buying the whole thing. So there are slightly different designs of rollers out there. Some of them are just one thing. If you find the roller is squeaking as you do it and maybe the connection isn't quite right, make sure the barrel is rolling properly. But on the whole, you can't go that wrong, to be honest. And they're very cheap, like I said. So the next thing is roller maintenance. A lot of people don't realize that you do have to look after these things because at the end of the day, you can harm yourself if you don't. So the first thing to say is sterilization. These things are going into your skin, they're penetrating into your skin, and they're potentially going to be touching your blood as well, maybe putting things into the bloodstream. So cleanliness and hygiene is very important. I will actually leave an affiliate link to the spray that I'm going to talk about now in the description, the one that I personally have and use and recommend to my patients as well. So the spray here is it's an isopropyl alcohol spray. I think it's kind of a what percentage, maybe about 70%, something like that. And so when you get these devices, these rollers, in fact, I've got my roller over there. There we go. And by magic, I'm back with this. So this is typically how you get these things. You have a clear case so you can see everything inside. And what you want to make sure is, you might not be able to see it on camera, so I'll hold it like this. There is a shape within this case that matches roughly the actual instrument. And what you want to look for is this section here, where the actual barrel of the roller is. When you first get it, in terms of deciding which roller to get, if you're going to buy it again, what you want to see is a lack of contact between the needles and the actual case. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more detail. So I'm going to open this. This is sterile, by the way. Well, it won't be now, but it was. So when you look at these rollers, what you'll find is you have the handle here, and then you have the barrel here that spins, that I'm spinning with my finger now. And if I do it from the front view like this, you can see either side of the barrel, and you've got the slight kind of, I'm not a architect or engineer or anything like this. I don't know what the technical term is, but these arms that come out, And these arms have that rod going between them like a toilet roll holder, and then the toilet roll sits in between. These arms, because they come out past the barrel, when you look at the case, you can see the arms don't go inside this sort of dug out area. They sit on the side like this. Hang on, let me do it there. Like that. And what happens is they are suspended so that when you look on the side, the actual needles aren't touching the bottom of the case. That's very crucial to stop the needles blunting. Because if they're blunting, you're just going to cause trauma. Now, sometimes vertically, they don't touch. That's fine. But the issue you might have is if there is movement, and I'm going to show you this on camera here, if there is movement for this to slide back and forth in the case, what happens is as you slide back and forth, I can see it here, like that, those needles are now hitting the plastic. So they're not hitting the bottom of the case, but if I slide forward, they're not hitting. But if I slide backwards, move the roller this way, they are hitting that plastic. So they are getting blunted. So if I have the lid on, and if I put it in my bag somewhere, and I'm moving it around, if it's like this, I know it's not going to hit the case. If it's like that, I know the needles aren't going to hit the case. If it's like that in my bag, and it's sliding down or back, those needles are blunting. And if I go vertical like this, it's not going to hit the case. So these are the sort of checks that you want to do when you get your roller, just to make sure that everything is being maintained in between uses. So this is one I got just to test out, is not one that I personally would probably use. But if you are someone that is going to keep this case in a single position, like in your bathroom cabinet, like I do, and I know it's going to stay like this the entire time and never be moved, the fact that the needles might blunt if I hold it vertical, that's not a problem, because it's never going to be vertical. It's only going to stay like this. And this is why sometimes maintaining a roller where, let me open this again, where the handle and the barrel are separate to the point where you unplug it and then you can just replace the barrel. Sometimes they make sense if you're traveling, because you can unplug that, wrap this barrel maybe in some tissue or something like that. And even if it gets knocked about, the needles are going to stay sharp because they're not blunting to something rock solid like this. So this is one of my actual ones that I use, but it's blunted now. Sacrifices I make for YouTube. But this would stay in my bathroom cabinet completely flat like this. So I don't have to worry about the needles. It's not going to move at all. So I'm happy with that. Now, how do I actually make this sterile? So with that isopropyl alcohol spray, let's pretend I've just finished needling, and I will show you technique in this video. What I would do is take the spray in let's say my right hand, depending on whether this is flipped on video or not, but this is my right hand. I would then flick this barrel so it's spinning, and it's continuously spinning. And as it's spinning, I would have the spray here. So I would go spin, spray, 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 spray. So the entire thing now, as it was spinning, caught spray. So that is now completely sterilized. Then I would try and do the underside of the roller. So spray, spray, spray. That's now sterile. At that point, I would then spray the inside of the case, the bottom part of the case where the roller is going to rest. So I would spray all of this. That's all sterile. The underside of the roller is sterile. And I will then put them in the case very carefully, not to blunt the needles like that, which I've failed at because it's on camera. So the underside is sterile. Then I would look at it from the side, spray like this. So the side of the roller is sterile. Same on this side. And then I would do the top. That will then sit in the cabinet like this. At which point I would take the top of the case, spray all the inside of this as well, and then pop the lid on like that. So all of that interior, including every part of the roller itself, is actually sterile now, ready for my next use. A little tip, if you're going to do that, by the way, depending on the roller that you have, an area that you might commonly miss is between the handle, I'll hold it like this, between the handle and the roller. You've got that little gap there, and just make sure you get that area. As well as that, if I hold it from the front, you can see where these arms meet the barrel. Just make sure you spray down the side. If they're harboring some bacterial pathogens, what you don't want is that to come off and be pushed into your skin down the line. So that's, when I go back to put this back in the bathroom, this is the procedure I'm going to go through to re-sterilize. If I'll probably put this in the bin because the needles are blunted now. But if it wasn't blunted, that's the way I would re-sterilize everything. I'm going to put that over here. Now, how long can that roller go for? This is part of roller maintenance. Those needles that you have there, when they get to you, hopefully they're pretty sharp or they're sharp enough. But the thing is, they're not going to stay sharp, especially if you do what I just did there and knock them against the case. But even if you don't do that, they've got a limited lifespan. So let's pretend, that is being used in the correct manner, in the right area, etc., etc. Typically, I would say, if it was in a clinic, I would do it once and throw it in the sharps bin because that's not contaminated with that patient. I can't use it for any other patient. At home, if it's just you, I mean, you're not contaminating because it's from you anyway. So I might use this. Let's pretend I was doing a cycle. Let's say I was doing this once a week. Somewhere between 5 and 10 sessions is when I would feel the difference in my skin and I would know the needles aren't sharp anymore. And at that point, I would just throw it away and get another one. Now, if you know this is something you're going to do for quite a while, I would suggest you probably bulk buy these because if you have to pay for shipping, you may as well just get 2 or 3 and it will last you quite a long time. Now, in terms of throwing it away, how do you plan that with your actual usage? Well, if let's say that is going to last 6 sessions, what I might do is know that, I'm going to throw it away after 6 weeks of once weekly use. And at that point, I'm going to stop needling and let the skin kind of recover. And I will feel that skin getting better and better and better over the weeks because I've done the stimulation, now it's going to grow. And maybe after 4 weeks, 5 weeks, depends on the individual and what you're treating and all these kind of things. I could say, okay, my skin feels fantastic now, and it's pretty much the same day after day, week after week. I think it's finished. Then I might decide, right, I'm going to start another cycle. Then I'll buy another one and carry on like that. So maintenance is key. Like, don't forget it. You could do all the right techniques, but if you don't maintain the cleanliness and the hygiene of this, or even the right type of roller with sharp needles, you could be having a problem with your skin just because you didn't maintain it properly. So don't pass over maintenance. It's very crucial. What's next? So here's a big one. Which skincare do I use? Could probably be like an hour video by itself, but I'm going to try and distill educational points which you can apply rather than saying this, and this, where you have to memorize everything. So again, it depends on what you're doing in terms of microneedling as to which skincare you use. So it's very, very important you understand the following point. When you use skincare is designed to be used on normal, non-inflamed skin. But what do you think is happening when you do needling in, let's say, 1 mil? You get a whole lot of debris in the skin, dead cells, probably bits of the immune system have come to the area, blood flood in the area. You've got possibly all these lysozymes which are full of hydrogen ions and making things acidic that were in one particular cell, now they've been thrown all over the place. So maybe the pH isn't everywhere. You've got a standard extracellular matrix in health, in physiology, in homeostasis. Extracellular matrix is the area outside of a cell. But during times of injury and trauma and inflammation and needling, that extracellular matrix is now in something called a liquid crystal phase, which is completely different. And the physiology is completely different. So when you use a skincare and people say, this skincare causes that to happen, yes, that's based on normal skin. Does that skincare do the same thing during times of massive debris and inflammation? But how can it when the cells are just dead because they've been destroyed? There's a completely different response to the same skincare at times of standard physiology, what we call homeostasis, and complete trauma and inflammation, especially if you're using a pen and you've got blood everywhere, massive inflammation everywhere. How do you think the same thing is going to happen? You've really got to understand that perspective. So it depends not just on what your actual skin condition is or your goals with needling, which I think are obvious, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but it depends what type of needling you're doing. If you're doing a 0.2 mil, not trying to breach the VEJ and just run a skincare penetration, fine, you just do your normal skincare because that's all that's designed for anyway. But if you're doing that 1 mil, the reason you're doing, and again, I'm not saying 1 mil is right for you watching this, I'm taking that as an example. If you're doing that 1 mil, for example, then you're doing that because you want to do collagen induction. Okay, that's why this used to be called CIT, collagen induction therapy. Now, you are going to make other proteins as well, but let's just not be too technical here. So you're trying to create collagen. At that point, you're creating that wound healing cascade. You're triggering that wound healing cascade. And so there's different goals completely with these different needling depths, even though to an uninitiated person, they made it like, oh, it's the same thing. And so if you do that 1 mil and you get that much higher, shall we say, level of inflammation, what makes you think your skincare is going to have the same effect when the skin is completely different now that you're treating? Do be careful. So when you have certain things like GHK copper, which I know people ask me about, which you get from The Ordinary, yes, that can be useful in the process of neocollagenesis, which is where you're creating new collagen formation. But that's in standard physiology. Where is the study that looks at GHK copper in times of inflammation and trauma and a completely destroyed extracellular matrix? I don't believe one exists, but I could be wrong. Obviously, if you found one, post it in the comments below. I'll take a look. But it's not there. And so, do you even need skincare? Are you ever going to achieve the right outcome when you do a full 1 mil? It's a debatable topic. I don't know the exact answer because I've never seen a study that really looks into it. I just have an opinion. But in terms of skincare, look, I made a video recently, not recently, about the theoretical best skincare ever, which, before you jump to conclusions, I don't sell because no one sells it. It's not been made yet, but I think it will be made. When you have any cell, let's say in this context in the skin, some people say, I want collagen, I want to reduce pigmentation, I want firmness, I want tightness, whatever. What you're saying is you want optimal cell function because a cell doesn't decide to work on pigmentation on Monday and then collagen on Tuesday and elastin on Wednesday, etc., etc. All of these things are simply downstream of optimal cell function. So if you just get the cell to overall work better, you get all of these things at the same time. That's the only way it works. There's no cell that works on one particular thing at a time. It just works on doing everything perfectly constantly. And if you haven't heard of something called NAD, I suggest you go and have a look because that's probably going to be the future of the anti-aging industry. I may be wrong, but that's my opinion. Now, NAD is so crucial to cell function. I personally clinically have seen cases where it has relieved symptoms of things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis, which is extraordinary to believe. I don't expect you to believe me. That's fine. It's not a video to talk about that, so I won't go into it in detail. But that's the power of using NAD because it improves the whole cell's function. Now, it's not as simple as just taking it. There's a massive, massive depth that I actually teach NAD. It takes a full day just to get the basics. So don't think that it's as simple as just taking it. But what I want to say is, if someone was to one day put NAD into a viable form of skincare and then apply it, then theoretically you've got the best thing to use because even in times of inflammation, that will actually calm inflammation as well. And it will start to improve the cell function, even in inflamed skin, traumatized skin, destroyed extracellular matrix, etc., not just in normal physiology or homeostatic skin. But the problem is getting it into skincare in a viable form. There are companies out there that have NAD skincare. I've looked at them. I think they're all terrible, so I don't recommend any of them, and I don't use any myself. I don't sell it, at least at the time of recording. I don't sell any myself either because it's an incredibly difficult process to get it right. But just for your education, that's what you should look for in the future. Now, there is another thing that a lot of my patients use. A long time ago, I made a video about testosterone propionate. This is a specific form of testosterone that is not meant to affect the entire body like hormone replacement or testosterone replacement therapy. It is designed to be broken down in the skin, so it doesn't really have much time to create visual changes everywhere else. Now, in the initial study, when they applied it to just half the face, it was only that half that improved and not the other half. So we've got a great idea that you only see visual changes and effects where it's applied. Now, the changes that you can get from that are amazing. Not everyone gets it. Every skin is different, but the ones that do get some phenomenal results. Concentration matters. If you do just 1%, that's typically nowadays just done to make sure it's safe for you. But then if you level up to 3%, you get phenomenal changes. I'll leave a link to the original video I made about it in the description. And the 1 year sort of before and after video as well that you can see as well. You can get it from any local dermatologist. You take the study and you say, look, in fact, not even dermatologists, anyone that could prescribe and say, look, here's a study, can we try this together, etc., etc. Or if you want to work with me on it, that's fine. There's a link in that as well in both those videos. Now, don't put that in after 1 mil needling either. That's something at 0.2 outside of the days where you're doing 1 mil. If I had to pick something, what I would actually pick is something that's like a cousin of NAD. This is after 1 mil if you're going to use anything in terms of skincare ingredients. But the NAD, like I said, is practically impossible to get viable when you're rubbing it in after a 1 mil needling, especially because blood's coming out. So how can something go in at the same time? But if you really want to do something, my recommendation is to look at something like niacinamide powder. Niacinamide is a cousin of NAD, hence why it works on so many different things at the same time. Hint, hint, NAD. But the niacinamide, typically when you use it in skincare, what you have is things like anti-mold, preservatives, additives, things like that, sometimes fragrance as well. I would never put that in skin. I think that's a really terrible idea. But if you get pure niacinamide powder, ideally in a fine mesh, a fine grain if you like, what you can do is get something like 2 to 5 grams of that and mix that in 100 ml of saline. Now, not water, because if you use pure water, the problem with that is it's hypertonic, which means as soon as you put it into the skin, it can flood into the cells and it can completely destroy the fact that the cells already have the right amount of water in them. So if you do not enough water, then sometimes it can drag water out of the cells because it's hypotonic. What you want is the same concentration as what's in the cells. Hence why we have saline. Saline is salt water, but the concentration of salt is so low, it's the same as what's in our actual cells. That's called isotonic. So to create a niacinamide formula that's isotonic, that is very cheap, by the way. Get some niacinamide powder for like a few pounds or dollars or euros, whatever. You can get saline for very cheap, probably the same price, and make your own mixture. And you can DIY it. You don't have to buy expensive serums. Now, there is a bit of a faff to get it and mix it and all that kind of stuff. If you can get just pure niacinamide serum somehow, that's fine as well. But what do I use in clinic? I use saline. That's it. When I'm doing that 1 mil, assuming it's 1 mil in clinic, I just put saline on because there's no risk. Sometimes you put these products on and people have a reaction, let's say to a vitamin C thing. In fact, in 2014, there's a very famous or locally famous paper that was published. I think it's Arab Shahi Sultani 2014 is the reference. And a patient was hospitalized because post-needling a particular product was used. Now, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, someone do correct me if I am, but I believe it was a vitamin C product. And a lot of people ran around saying, oh, we shouldn't use vitamin C after needling. And I'm sat there thinking, was it the vitamin C that caused the problem? Or was it the fact that it was in a product that had other things outside the vitamin C which maybe aren't compatible with human biology? Because how can vitamin C cause a problem? That's in all of us right now. And we're not freaking out. We're not hospitalized because we've got vitamin C in us. Everyone's got their own opinion on that particular paper. I've got mine. But this is, at the very least, it shows us that you do have to be careful with what you put on afterwards. And so I would say the purer the product that you use, hence why if you do want to do something, get a pure ingredient with nothing in it and DIY it at home, assuming you can get it perfectly. If you work in a contaminated area and you can't get it clean, obviously don't do it. But in clinic, I don't even do that. I just put saline. Remember that 1 mil is for collagen stimulation. It's not to enhance skincare penetration. And even if I do use a particular product, like I said, if I put it in when there's a whole lot of blood and inflammation, it's not going to give me the same result anyway. So all I want to do is put saline in to make sure the area is nice and tidy and calm and hydrated, etc., etc. And that's it. So at home, if I was to do 1 mil on myself, what will I wash it with? Just saline. I don't put any skincare in. Even if you do put skincare in, like I said, number one, it's not in skin, it's an inflamed skin. Number two, so what? If you're doing that once a week or at the pen maybe once a month, so what if once a month you get increased penetration of your skincare? What about the other 29 days? If you get no penetration, then you're still not doing that well, frankly. So I would rather use that 1 mil with just saline for the safety aspect. And also I'm going to do a collagen induction, not skincare penetration. And then outside that, the rest of the week, when it's not inflamed, I'll use that 0.2 and I get way more skincare penetration. I get 10 times the penetration. And I don't have to worry about ingredients mixing, with inflammation and things like that. So this is a complex topic, but it can be made very, very simple by realizing that a deeper penetration where there's wound healing, you can just use saline. And if you want better penetration, use a penetration technique of something like 0.2 mil and do whatever you want at that point. So, this idea of using dermarollers, pens to increase penetration, it's penetration or collagen induction, not both at the same time, in my view, at least. And now, hopefully, I've explained why too. So, after that, I'm going to give you an example routine. So, let's pretend today is a Monday, just as an example. I would do, and let's pretend the 0.2 and the 1 mil dermarollers are the ones that are right for you in this hypothetical example. So on the Monday in the evening, we would do the 1 mil, okay? And I'll show you the endpoint and things like that as well. And outside of that, I would do the 0.2 mil. I can do it every morning, every evening, whatever, and then put the skincare on immediately after. If I don't want to do that, if that's too much effort, and I would just use the 1 mil on the Monday evening and just skincare outside of that. So the only skincare I use right now is the testosterone propionate that I mentioned earlier in the video. Again, links in the video if you want to have a look at that, which is well worth a look, by the way. But I will use that without the 0.2 needling. Why? Because the point of that testosterone propionate cream is the fact that we don't want it to penetrate and affect the entire body. We want it to stay in the skin. So that's fine. However, if you do want to do needling the rest of the time in the week and you want to use that 0.2, use something different. Use something that's okay and designed to penetrate, to go into the skin. But then you've got that 1 mil on that one particular period. If it's in a pen, if you're using a pen, not that I recommend it, instead of repeating that schedule every week, you'll repeat it, that on the first of the month, 0.2 everywhere else. And then the next month, the first, again, you do that 1 mil. So it depends on what tool you're using to create your particular treatment plan or routine, weekly routine or monthly routine that you have. What else? So yeah, in the routine, if you want to go into a bonus territory, you could actually use LED at the same time. So the thing with LED, typically, and I made videos about this explaining how they work and everything, but typically you got three lights or three colors or wavelengths to be technical: blue, red, and near infrared, which doesn't have a color because it's invisible to the human eye. Now, if you use red at a time of inflammation, what red can do is actually increase the amount of inflammation there is. And on my channel, you can look for it. There was a patient with acne who was obviously quite inflamed, and I referred her for blue and near infrared only. But the clinic that she went to used red, and she knows it because she saw it at the side of her goggles. Now, when they use red in an inflamed state, her acne got so much worse instantly, straight away. And I interviewed this patient. You can see her on camera. Then I referred her somewhere else who would listen to me. They used just the blue and the near infrared, and the acne calmed down pretty much straight away. So that tells you that when you have a period of inflammation, red light isn't right. Red, without being too technical, will basically increase the activity of what's going on. But if the activity is inflammatory, you'll just increase the amount of inflammation potentially in the area. So you've got to be very, very careful. If you want to use LED post needling, the best thing to do is to wash everything off, ideally with saline, for the argument of hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic. Wash everything off, dab it dry, and then put the mask on. Or if you're in a clinic, put the clinical device on. But you want the blue and the near infrared. You want the blue because it's antibacterial. You don't want contamination there when you've made holes in the skin. And you want the near infrared to reduce the inflammation. Now, some people think, well, if you don't have the inflammation, how are you going to make collagen? You'll make collagen because you've physically stimulated it. If there's too much inflammation, the collagen will come out as a scar. If there's less inflammation, the collagen will still be made because the thing's got to repair the damage, but it won't be going into a scar. It'll just be normal collagen. That's the difference. So if you're going to do the LED, use the blue and near infrared. That's what I would do. And then the rest of the time, the other part of the month or the other part of the week, when you're not inflamed and the skin is just doing its normal job, then you can use the red if you like, and in combination with the near infrared, just to reduce the inflammation even more. So LED, you do have to be very, very careful how you add it into your routine, and specifically how you choose the wavelengths that you have as well. What you shouldn't do is, put the skincare on and then the LED, because the skincare will have ingredients, and if it's hit by radiation, the energy contained within that radiation could potentially, break that molecule and turn it into something that's potentially harmful or going to harm the skin in some way. So if you're going to use LED, that's why I said wash everything off, not harshly, a little bit of saline to clean everything if you want, and that's it. and then put it on straight away. But it has to be dry, not just clean, but dry. So the radiation isn't, number one, hitting something that could change into a harmful molecule, and number two, being absorbed by something other than the skin. The point is it's there to hit the skin. So why don't you clear everything off the skin and then turn it on? There's a big difference. So I hope that helps in terms of an example routine. Obviously, everyone is different and everyone has different conditions and everyone wants individual advice. I can't give individual advice through a comment because I have no idea what your skin looks like. But if you have questions about how to apply things and general principles, please put them in the comments. Maybe that can help me make another video, like a follow-up to this, to answer all of those comments as well. Roller preparation. So the first thing is, when you are about to start needling, this should be sterile. Okay, I showed you earlier how you actually sterilize these things, and that should be ready to go, nice and sterile. Obviously, that one isn't now because I've opened it for the video. But ideally, you want your skin to be clean as well. Now, you can just use a bit of water and dab it off. If you start to use a harsh cleanser, the problem is sometimes with these harsh cleansers, you have this dryness and tightness that comes as well. And I don't think that's a good thing because it could make things a little bit more sensitive. So do be careful. Some people also will talk about using isopropyl alcohol, like alcohol wipes, to clean the skin. And yeah, it's going to be clean, but it's probably going to dry the skin quite a lot as well, which I don't think is necessarily a good idea. And especially on sensitive skin, that can make things really sting as well. So I personally don't recommend the isopropyl alcohol to clean everything. You can just use plain water. If you want to go a little bit further because you think there is something on the skin to clean off, you could use something along the lines of, say, Clinisept or Hypo 21, HYPO 21, things like that, which are designed to be on the skin, but they don't necessarily dry things out. If you've just come back and you're covered in sweat, probably just your normal shower, I think, is going to be enough. In terms of what you use afterwards, if you're going to use something afterwards, not that I recommend it, do a patch test first. Just make sure that you're compatible with that, because if you don't and you put it on after needling and you have a reaction, is the reaction because you needled wrong, or because of the serum that you used, or because the serum interacted with inflamed skin instead of normal skin? You've no idea. So try and do these things individually before combining them to figure out the answer to that question, should that question ever arise. Next thing I've written down here is numbing cream. So some people will say, why not use numbing cream? Well, the thing is, the numbing cream will actually change the way that blood flow is happening underneath the skin, without being too technical. And you don't really want to mess with that when, that's going to change the amount of swelling that you get. It's going to change the response to anything that happens to the skin. And so typically I don't use numbing cream at all. When patients are in the clinic and I'm showing them how to do it for the first time while it's on video, in that situation, I'm only using a 0.2 anyway, because I'm not trying to create the treatment there. I'm trying to give them education so they know how to do it for their individual skin, and that's it. So numbing cream, yeah, I don't do it. If it is sore or difficult to do, and it will be the first time you do it, let's pretend you're going to use a 1 ml. First time you do that, yes, it's going to be sore. But instead of using numbing cream, just don't put all the pressure on. Just do it really lightly so you can just about feel it. And that may alone make your skin go quite pink. Maybe not my color skin, but you know what I'm trying to say. And then the next time, because your skin has adapted and grown a little bit from that, you can go a little bit further. And the next time, a little bit further. So instead of using numbing cream, just do it normally, but don't put the pressure in. Slowly, slowly work up. As your skin grows and gets thicker, it actually becomes more and more comfortable. I remember, many times when I started my first ever cycle, it really hurt. And I empathize with people that say, oh my God, this hurts so much. Yes, it does, but start slow. So I did, and it barely penetrated, but I still could see my skin was a little bit darker because of the blood that came. And then over time, after, let's say, a few weeks of doing it, I was doing it fully everywhere, and it was fine. Yes, I could feel it, but it wasn't the pain like I had in the first week. So look at changing the technique as an alternative to numbing cream if you can. What else? So roller technique. Now, straight off the bat, I'm going to say I made a long video about this, going into the technique in detail. In this video, I'm going to do a short version. So if you want the more detailed version, I'll leave the link in the description. If you want to stay here and you want a short, succinct summary, I'll do that for you here. Entirely up to you what you want to do. So I've got my roller, which is not sterile. What I'm going to do is show you first how to actually hold it. sometimes these handles, which you can see here, they have a groove just behind the barrel here. And what that does, it tempts people to put their finger on it like this, okay? So that when you roll, you're pushing from here. Sometimes that might be useful, sometimes it might not. The problem is sometimes people push too hard because they see that there and they think if I push harder, they're going to get more results. Not necessarily the case. Sometimes you get less result because you damage the skin. So instead of holding it like this, I would suggest you hold it like a pen, like this, okay? And you can hold it this way around or this way around, whichever you prefer. Try it for different parts of the face. You might prefer something different. I will probably hold it like this, like as if I'm going to sign my name with it. So something like this. This prevents you from being able to put too much pressure and cause damage to the skin. So if I hold it like this, I'm going to demonstrate on my face here. Sometimes I might twist it so it's on the side and I can go like this and that's fine. So the technique really is not as complex as some people make it out to be, in my view. And I'm pretty sure the names that I mentioned in the past in this video, with the people with the most experienced needling in the world, I'm pretty sure they do it in the same way. So first thing to say is you want short strokes. If you start doing massive strokes, the problem is the pressure is not going to be maintained all the way through. The angle is probably not going to be maintained. It's harder to maintain the consistency. Whereas if you stay very, very short, you can make it much, much easier. And in terms of the angulation, some people say, well, you find an area, you go down one direction, then perpendicular, and then direct diagonal like this. The problem is the middle of all that is then over-treated relative to everywhere else, which is under-treated. So what I say is instead of aiming for a number of passes in a number of different directions, because your skin doesn't, give you more or less a result based on the direction you come from. At the end of the day, the skin has no eyes, right? All it sees is a needle coming in. It just experiences trauma. Whether the needle comes in from this direction or this direction or this direction, it's still going in the same direction when it reaches that particular point. So it's not going to make a difference. All you want to do is choose a biological end result rather than a number for arbitrary numbers' sake over here. So what you want is a pink visual of the skin. And that's it. If you get pinpoint bleeding, you probably will when you first do it, if you're doing a deeper level, deeper needle, sorry. And that's fine. But if you see some pinkness and you keep on going and Niagara Falls of blood comes out your face, that's too far. It's not necessarily going to help. More is not better. If you do too little, you're not going to get anything. If you do too much, you'll just inflame and overtreat. There is a golden window. So there's such a thing as too little and too much. Please bear that into mind. So you want to go like this, and then you ideally do it in the mirror so you can see that things are going to be quite pink. You're going to go like this, short strokes all the way across, and then that's pink. So now I'm going to go to this next area, any direction, because the skin doesn't know which direction the needle is coming from. That's now pink. I'm going to go over here. Now, ideally, what you want to do is stretch the skin, though, because if the skin is not stretched, even if that's, say, 1 mil, probably not going to reach 1 mil because the skin is like a sponge now. So if you're treating someone like this, maybe pull down and then move your mouth to the other side of your face like this, and then actually treat like this. And you'll feel a difference in how it feels because the needle's actually penetrating to the right distance now. And you can do it on your neck as well. So if you're doing it on the neck, you want to stretch away. If I'm doing it here, look upwards. And then like this, I can make sure that everything is penetrating well. If I'm doing the side, again, I want to lean to the side like this and maybe change my grip so it's upside down. And then go like this all the way down, maybe stretch with my hand as I go around like this, whichever you prefer. If you're doing the forehead, that's pretty tight, frankly, because the scalp is very fixed. So you can just go very easily in whatever direction you prefer. Whereas in the eyes, this is the tricky one. This is where, if I'm doing this, if let's pretend this is a 1 mil, over here, that's fine. The skin around the eye is some of the thinnest skin in the body. So 1 mil is going to destroy that area. The thickness of the skin may only be 0.1 or 0.2, depending on what paper you'd like to quote. So that is going to be way too deep if that's a 1 mil. So let's pretend this is a 0.2 or 0.1 for the eyes. So what I'm trying to do is pull down. My voice may sound funny here, but I'm going to pull down. And what I want to do is single strokes like this, like a brush stroke. I'm going around like that, like this. And instead of the barrel being flat against the skin, like this, I'm trying to angle it like that as I do the stroke. So it's really not the whole barrel that is penetrating. I'm going to angle it and the top half is what's coming around like this. And if you want to do the upper eyelids, pull it up so it's overlying the bone here, and then you can do that area. The bit that's here, you don't be stupid. If you go through the skin there, you're going to hit literally your eyeball. So if you can stretch some of it over the bone, you can do that particular area, and that's it. And again, you need something very, very thin, because one mil is going to destroy such thin skin. Let me put these back on so I can actually see what I'm doing here. Now, temples, again, same thing, very close to the scalp, so it's very stretched. You can just go like that. If you're going to do parts of the body, which is fine, the principle is exactly the same. So you want a stretch somewhere. So let's pretend I'm on my arm here. What I want is to stretch the arm out. Let's pretend I'm in the forearm. I would stretch this out so the skin is stretched, and I would hold it again, probably on its side like that. And I would go like this, or I would hold it like a pen and then go like this and stretch it out. If I want the other side, again, I would do this so it's nice and stretched and then go like that. If I'm doing my leg, I would use my hand to pull away and then go like this, nice and short strokes. So the principle is the same. You just got to apply it in a commonsensical way, depending on which area of your body, face, neck, etc., that you're particularly treating. But hopefully that wasn't too difficult to understand. And that is a short version. Like I said, the long version is in the description if you want to have a look at that as well. What have I got next? Post-rolling care. So yeah, I'll just recap this. If you're going to use water when you have done your needling, that water is going to be a very high concentration, which means it's going to go into the cells, flood the cells in not necessarily a good way. So that's why I prefer saline personally. LED, I've mentioned as well, quick summary, use blue and near infrared as opposed to red, which might trigger more inflammation. This is all based on the 1 mil, by the way. Some people will also say, don't sweat or don't do any exercise for a day or two afterwards. I understand why they say it. It's a reasonable thing to say, but it's dependent on how you're needling. If you're using a pen where there's massive amounts of penetration with massive corresponding levels of inflammation, yeah, that probably makes sense, because you've got a load of inflammation here. If you then increase the heat going through your body and you inflame even more because you've just run a marathon, potentially that could make things worse here. But a roller is not going to give you that amount of that amount of number of penetrations. It's not going to give you that level of inflammation. So when I have done it on myself and for my patients over the past 10 years or more than 10 years, the thing you have to remember is with that lower level of inflammation, you're not at the same risk. So I've done it with patients on it, and I've gone to the gym afterwards and I've had no trouble. My patients have as well, not a single person, because I'm using a roller. So again, that roller comes out on top when it comes to a pen in this regard. So the no sweat, no exercise, dependent on the technique that you use. So my advice after 10 years of doing more than 10 years, should be 10 years plus. In terms of personal stories, my acne scars have basically gone. Now, I can't give you a before and after for a very personal reason. I had really terrible acne as a teenager and the scars. And I hated the way I looked. To the point where really there's not many pictures of me at all as a teenager. I didn't want to get in them. I never took selfies. I didn't like the way I looked. So that's why I can't give you before and after. But I'm sure many of you watching this will relate to that. I'm sure that's in your life as well, and I'm sorry to hear that. But that's why I believe in this. My acne scars have gone, and I have many colleagues in the industry who are in the same boat. And if you do it right, it can be a great treatment for it. But if you do it right, if you do have scars, I would say get the scars diagnosed first, because different scars need to be treated in different ways. But for me, yeah, they massively helped my scarring. Do remember that everyone is different as well. If you have particular medication, if you have particular systemic condition or skin condition or allergies or particular skincare, advice in this video might need to be tweaked for what you're doing. So please bear that in mind. Don't follow this exactly and think it's going to be a miracle. So some of the things I've said today may be not great for certain people because of their individual, at least temporary situation. Maybe they need to wait. Maybe they need to change things. So do understand that everyone is different. And if you can, see someone. It's not a sales pitch because you don't have to see me. Like, you can see some of the people I've mentioned in this video, because if you do that and you get the right education and you know how to do it right for you, yes, you might have to pay for that consultation, but never again for the rest of your life. And you don't have any risk of doing things wrong and having to figure out more treatment to try and treat the consequences that went wrong because you didn't see someone in the first place. So if you can, yeah, do see someone if possible. In fact, on that note, there are people in my online school group where they post about their needling experiences, and I've had live calls showing people specific techniques for specific parts of the face and the neck, so that we can guide everyone through it. In fact, if you're interested in joining that, where I teach live every week, the link will be in the description. I go through cosmetic things, longevity things, nutrition, dental, all sorts of different things. And there's lots of people in similar boats to you that we even help them go through treatment, and everyone shares their experiences. I also want to say that everything in this video is based on this hypothetical patient that we're treating with no medical history, no medications, no conditions, no allergies, etc., etc. Like a sort of standard patient, which doesn't exist. I also want to say that there is going to be new research in the future. Some of the things in this video may be updated over time because new studies are released, or maybe at some point someone will create that NAD cream and it is viable, and that becomes the only cream I use, the only skincare I use in my entire life, and I stop the testosterone propionate and I just go to that. Who knows? So do keep an eye out. There may be another version of this. If things need to be updated in this video, I will try and leave a pinned comment down below. So do check that before you try and action any of these things in this video if you can. So now I want to get to frequently asked questions. These questions have been taken from comments all across questions, have been taken from all of my comment sections on my videos, from comments on my Instagram posts, questions on my online school group where I teach, lots and lots of different places. So they're in no particular order, but typically if you do have further questions, they're probably going to be in this section here. So the first thing is, which serums are safe during or after, such as hyaluronic acid from The Ordinary or even vitamin C? So a few questions there, I'm going to answer them one after the other. Which serums are safe? And safety is relative. The only safe, risk-free thing that you can use is saline, because there's nothing to react to. It's basically what's already is water, the equivalent of water for us. That's the only thing that's 100% safe. Everything else has some sort of risk because of how you needle before you do it, because of any preservatives that are kept in there, etc., etc. Some people are asking about the hyaluronic acid from The Ordinary, can use that. So the problem with hyaluronic acid is when it's in our skin, it has a particular molecular weight or a particular size and shape, actually, if you like. And you can't get that exact same weight in skincare, because if it was that way, it wouldn't penetrate. So it's very low weight typically in skincare, and low weight can be pro-inflammatory. So typically I never use HA post needling because it's absurd to put an incompatible HA into an area that has a completely different molecular weight. That's why certain HAs can actually cause inflammation when you use injectables. That's a long story, but I won't get into that too much. But that's possible. So personally, I wouldn't use that at all. Some people ask about vitamin C. Why? Vitamin C, yes, it might be implicated in the process where certain collagen is made. But if you have a load of vitamin C, but you don't have the other requirements, you're still not going to make the collagen anyway, because there are rate limiting steps. And Arab Shahi Sultani 2014, that particular vitamin C product that was used hospitalized the patient because of a granuloma. So if you're going to use anything with a 0.2 mil roller, just use a normal skincare. With a deeper one where you are instituting wound healing, just use saline, because you're trying to create physical stimulation, not penetration. The penetration is from the other depth. I might sound cynical, but I've never had an issue doing that for years and years and years. Next question. Does HA dry the skin if not spritzed? Now, I fully appreciate some people watching this, English isn't their first language. So if that's you and you don't understand the word spritzed, it's basically spraying water. Let's have a spritz. Let's have a spray of water. HA can dry the skin because if it doesn't penetrate properly, it sits on top. And it sits on top drawing in water, but it will draw the water from your skin, assuming there's none in the atmosphere. And so it can leave you drier. So, and even if you spritz it and you include water, the problem you have there is the HA may still probably most likely, in fact, not be the same molecular weight as what is naturally found in your skin. So the physiological effect is going to be completely different anyway. So yes, it can dry the skin, but even if it didn't, I still wouldn't use it because it's not biocompatible really in a physiological context as opposed to an inflammatory context based on the molecular weight and shape that you naturally find in the dermal extracellular matrix. Next question. Can I use growth factors / stem cells? Theoretically, you could. I mean, nothing's stopping you from using it. But the problem you have is when you have growth factors and stem cells after needling, you're saying growth factors and stem cells in a completely inflamed context, assuming this is the 1 mil that you're using or a deeper penetration. And so how well are they going to work in terms of inflammation when you want to repair rather than grow? Personally, I don't think it's worth it. If you want to use that, not that you need it, and I don't recommend it, use that the rest of the time with the 0.2 mil and get 10 times more penetration with those things, as opposed to wasting it when you've got blood everywhere and you're not treating normal skin everywhere. How often can I microneedle? So hopefully this video has explained it, but I will explain that with a little bit more detail. So if you use a 0.2 mil multiple times a day if you wish, because you're not introducing wound healing, it's too shallow. If you're using something that breaches the DEJ, such as a 1 mil with a pen, probably once a fortnight, once a month, depending on the person doing it for you. If you're doing it with a roller, probably about once a week is what I've personally used, and that's absolutely fine. Now, when you use that 1 mil, typically from the next day, you can start to use that 0.2 again if you like, because the holes that you've created aren't as high as with a pen when you use a roller. So they're going to seal up relatively quickly and the inflammation will settle down a lot quicker. Once the skin is no longer red, i.e. the inflammation has stopped, then you can go back to typical 0.2 mil just before you put your skincare on if you wish. Now, when can I wash my face or wear makeup or use actives? So in terms of that, when you finish microneedling, if you're using saline like I recommend, you can just wash it straight away with that because there's no risk. It's just saline. In terms of just plain water, I would probably, personally, I would wait probably about 15 to 20 minutes because it takes, let's say, 12 to 15 minutes for the holes to clear up. And to seal up, sorry. If you put pure water in at that point, what you're doing is disturbing the water potential gradient within the dermis, between the cells and the extracellular matrix outside the cells. So you don't want to disturb that. You want to keep it isotonic if possible. So I would wait, a good sort of 15, 20 minutes once everything is sealed back up, and then you can go if you need to. Wear makeup, again, I would wait at least that much and using actives again. Some people will say at 24 hours in clinic. I think mostly that's just for insurance because the time it takes to seal these holes up is not that long. Again, Stahl 2012 was a paper that looked at this. So I don't think you need to wait that long. I've had patients use makeup much sooner than a day. Never, ever had an issue, personally. How soon after laser or peel or fillers or Botox? So how soon after those things can you do needling? So if you're doing something like a laser, I would wait until all the inflammation has settled. So you do the laser, maybe your skin's been burned off, and you're going to be red for a very long time. Once there is no residual redness and everything is basically complete, then you can carry on if you wish. For a chemical peel, again, same principle. So once you've done the peel, your skin is maybe it's going to peel if it's quite an invasive peel, or maybe it's quite a light one where you just go a bit red. Wait until all of that has gone and you can't tell that you've had a treatment and you're back to normal, then you can carry on. If you do it too early, then you're just going to add to the inflammation that's there. Potentially, that's going to cause a lot of negative consequences for you. Dermal fillers, that's a tricky one. Some people, if you've had particular fillers which I think are terrible, like Juvederm or Revelax, if you put those deep somewhere a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and you needle over the top of it, even though you're not, the filler is deep, but you're needling quite shallow, that could trigger a reaction to the old filler. And it might look like the microneedling has damaged you, but it hasn't. It's the filler, and your body has just woken back up to it. So it depends on which filler you're doing. If you've got a good filler, there's only really 2 good fillers in the world at the time of recording, in my opinion. One is called Revanesse, company is called Prolenium from Canada, and one is called Yvoire, Yvoire, and that is, I can't remember the manufacturer's name, but they're from South Korea. Probably the only 2 decent fillers I think are out there. You can go straight away. You can go probably a couple of weeks after, and even that couple of weeks is only so that if you need the filler adjusting or adding slightly more, you have enough time to get that done before you carry on needling. Botox, I mean, frankly, you can probably do it, the next day, because the Botox is dissociated from its carrier protein very, very quickly, and it's attenuated after a while. It just disintegrates, like it's done its job very, very quickly. So for insurance purposes, typically people will say 2 weeks, and I get that. I do get there's an insurance aspect to it, but realistically, if you wanted to do that, 1 week or a few days, I've never had an issue with that from any of my patients. What depth for scars, pores, and sensitive skin? So for scarring, it depends on what the actual scar is. Some scars they go into the skin, so they're dipped, if you like an atrophic scar. Some are flat, and some come up, and that's like an extra growth, and they increase the thickness. They're hypertrophic scars. It depends on which you're doing. If you've got an atrophic scar, it depends on the depth of that. You want to try and break it up. So you got to try and see someone that can tell you the depth of those things. If it's flat, again, it depends on what structure you'd like to reach to treat everything. So see someone to get the depth right. If it's hypertrophic, probably wouldn't do needling, in my opinion. It's very difficult to sort the risk, and it's very difficult to go through all the information for hypertrophic because they're much more complex. That's probably a video by itself, which I might do in the future. But typically, for an atrophic scar, this doesn't mean it's for everyone. Please bear that into context. If you try this, it may not work for you. But commonly, we tend to go for something like a 1 to 1.5 mil, depending on the scar that we see in clinic. But again, every scar is different, and it doesn't mean that that's perfect for you. Pores. Well, there's not really a specific depth for pores. Your skin is going to normalize, and pores are going to normalize when it's healthy. So personally, I don't think needling is a pore treatment or pore visibility treatment. I mean, you can't get rid of pores because you need it for your skin to survive, but you can try and minimize the appearance of pores in certain ways. Potentially a laser is probably better than needling for pores, in my opinion. Sensitive skin, I just wouldn't needle. If it's sensitive, then something is not quite right, and then it's probably very prone to inflammation. So if you do something inflammatory, you're probably going to get too much inflammation in that particular context. So if you've got sensitive skin, I think the better thing to do is to figure out why it's sensitive and try and treat that, and then needle with normal skin, not sensitive skin, if that makes sense. Can rollers be reused? Rollers can be reused up to a number of times until the needle blunts. Typically, like I said, I think it might be 5 to 10 uses, and then it's done. If you're in a clinic, the problem is you've got multiple patients and you'll contaminate it. So in a clinic, I would use it once and then throw it in the bin, and that's it. What about dragging and tears from rollers, pens, stamps? I have answered this. If you just come straight to the FAQs, then stamps aren't really going to do that if a tear, because if you do it properly and it's only vertical movement, there's no horizontal to drag the skin. Pens can, because the needle's going up and down, the pen's going horizontal, so the needle goes diagonal. And as it goes in the skin, if the pen's still going sideways, that's how you drag it. But a roller will grip the skin, and I've never seen a tear from a roller in my experience. So how hard to press and how many passes? Here's the thing, in terms of how hard to press, I can't really describe that, as I hope you can appreciate, on video. But ideally, you want... I'm not going to try and answer. I can't answer. I can't describe it. And in terms of how many passes, you want to keep going until the endpoint is pink. If you get pink with certain pinpricks of blood, that's fine. You probably will get that to start with. And as your skin grows and gets thicker, you'll probably just be pink. If you go beyond that, there's no massive benefit, frankly, at the end of the day, in terms of an anti-aging context. Why might I have no redness? So some people, if you're not pressing hard enough, then you won't get any redness. Sometimes you're doing it on purpose because it's hurting and you just want to get used to it. That's fine. No problem at all. So do check if that's the reason why you're having it. Next question, can it help scars, melasma, redness? I've mentioned scars already. Can it help melasma? So the thing is with melasma, it's a pigmentation issue. And what you don't want is something called pigment dropout, where you've got pigment sitting in the skin. If you have a large needle and you then penetrate that, you create a funnel down. That pigment then falls down that hole. It's now deeper in the skin, so it's probably going to be even harder to get rid of. Maybe it's more visible. Maybe they're going to build up more through different thicknesses of the skin, different layers of the skin, because you made a penetration, and then it's going to be more visible. Maybe it's going to be darker in that. So melasma, it's not needling is not a treatment for melasma on the whole. I have seen something called, I think, the Lima protocol. I can't remember. I read it in a book once, where they specifically did use needling for melasma, and somehow it worked. I'm not going to go through that today because if you get it wrong, you can seriously damage yourself. But if you're going to use needling for pigmentation, I would, there is a video I made about it, but in short, you want to use a 0.2 mil simply to increase skincare penetration. And then you put anti-pigment ingredients, which penetrate up to 10 times more for that. Now, will that treat melasma? No, because melasma is not caused by lack of microneedling. It will try and help some of the visual pigmentation, but it's not a treatment for it at all. Because even if you treat melasma, if you try and control melasma with a roller and certain skincare ingredients, what's to stop it not coming back in the future, right? Nothing, because you haven't actually treated it. So please bear that in mind. Melasma, I think, if you really want to treat it, go with other treatments, which I won't go through here. That's a different video. Redness, I don't necessarily think it will help redness because it will make you more red when you run your needles over it. Redness is a sign of inflammation, right? Something's inflamed, or maybe the skin is just very thin. You can see the blood a lot easier. So doing something like this, where you can cause a lot of damage, potentially could make things worse. Now, if you do it right and you increase skin thickness over time, maybe you can see the blood a little bit less easily. So that indirectly may help some of the redness appearance. But again, it's not treating the root cause. You're just trying to control it. That's all. Is it safe for the neck and the eyes, the scalp and the body? So for the neck, again, yes. For the eyes, it's a tricky one because if you do it wrong, it's not safe. You've got to really, really lower the needle depth, the needle size for that, because the skin is very thin. So if the skin is only, let's say, the 0.1, 0.2 mil, you've got to reflect that in your roller. So really, if you're going for the eyes, 0.1, 0.2 is about as much as you can do. I don't think it's worth doing any more than that, personally. Scalp, yes, you can do the scalp. The issue with treating the scalp is if you use a roller, hair can get tangled up. Now, if you've got very, very short hair, that's not enough to get tangled up. I could probably just about get away with it. Then you should be fine with a roller. But if you're someone with very long hair, it's going to be too difficult to not get it tangled up. And sometimes that pen, like I said, is going to create too many penetrations, and you risk over treatment as well. So potentially you want to do something like a roller where you do very, very short strokes. If you do long ones, then the barrel fully rotates and the hair can get caught up in it. So you're probably better off doing a roller with very, very short strokes and then lifting to the next area. Let me demonstrate, actually. So let's pretend this is the scalp. Very, very short strokes as you part the hair if you need to the next place, very, very short, to the next place, very, very short, to the next place, very, very short. And it's without a full rotation, the hair can't get tangled up in it. Or if you want to use a stamp and you're happy that you're going to probably get a hand ache or an arm ache because you go in and out that many times, by all means, that's absolutely fine as well. Next question, can I microneedle with acne/blackheads? So if you have acne, potentially you could, but it's not a default yes or no. If you needle where there is active acne, that you put a needle through a spot, all hell breaks loose. Like, it's a very inflamed thing, acne, and you've then created much more inflammation. So don't do that. Another thing is there's a certain type of bacteria which is highly associated with acne. If you then pick that up with a device, that bacteria, and then you spread it to another part of the face, is it possible for the acne to now spread to that particular area? I think it may be possible in certain situations. So do be careful with that. If you've got acne, say, on your back and you want to needle your face, I don't think there's going to be a massive issue with it. If you have acne just on your forehead and you want to needle over here, again, I've had patients needle in that way and they've been absolutely fine. Some haven't, because even if it looks like there's no acne somewhere, maybe there's a spot on its way through underneath, but you can't see it. And you then needle and you make it worse and possibly a bit painful. So do be careful with acne. On the whole, my actual advice would be treat the acne and then just needle as normal instead of trying to worry about balancing the two if you can. If you've got blackheads, theoretically you can, but typically if you've got blackheads, the skin is not as great as it could be. It's not functioning as well as it could be. So you're needling something and your response may reflect the fact that the skin is not able to respond very well. So I'm not entirely convinced if you've got blackheads that the response is going to be as good. So bear that into mind. I would rather people figure out why there's so many blackheads, sort that out, get the skin to normalize, and then do the needling if possible. How do I clean the roller? Again, just a quick one. So you get that spray, the isopropyl alcohol spray the entirety of the roller and the inside of the case, and then put it back together where it's sterile, and then you'll be much better off. Should I clean the face with alcohol? Here's the thing. When you clean with an alcohol wipe, yes, it's going to be clean. I don't doubt that. But it's probably going to dry you out. It's probably going to be sensitive. For some people, it might sting. Some people, it might burn in the eyes. I don't do it. Yeah, I will clean the skin with something like Clinisept or Hypo 21 or saline if there's nothing really much to clean off, and that's it. And I've never had an issue with that. How to use numbing cream. If you are going to use numbing cream, not that I recommend it, what you want to do is create a thin layer. So if the numbing cream is white, you don't want to rub it so that you can't see the white. You want to still see the white and just leave a thin layer everywhere. The best way to do it is to get a wooden spatula that's completely flat, smear the paste on the end, and then use a spatula to smooth it everywhere, like it's a shaving foam or something like that. And then use the same spatula to wipe it all off in one go afterwards, instead of a tissue that just spreads it around the face and it's a faff trying to get it off. But again, I don't use numbing cream. If you scroll back in the video and see the alternative to that that I mentioned before. Is there another way to numb the skin? What alternatives are there? Can we use ice? I think ice is an option. But you've got to remember that one of the reasons you are going to heal from the wound healing is the fact that blood is coming to the area. If you freeze that skin, you're constricting the blood vessels so less blood can come in. So if you're causing damage and then restricting the blood flow, how well do you expect that damage to actually be repaired and healed? It's a tricky one. Now, if you do ice for one particular area and then needle, and then you leave it to warm up because it's a warm room or something, that's fine. That cold temperature is very, very temporary, and that's not a problem. But if you keep on making the area cold for a long period afterwards, I think that's then going to affect the healing afterwards and therefore affect your results too. When can I use sun cream? So any kind of cream afterwards, I would suggest, again, this is assuming you're doing the deeper needling, let's say 1 mil where you breach the DEJ, knowing that these penetrations close up probably about 15 minutes afterwards. Just to be safe, I would give maybe 20-25 minutes before you put anything on if you're going to use sun cream. Can I use ice post-treatment? Technically you can, but why would you want to restrict the blood flow that is crucial for you to heal from the trauma you've caused in order to get better looking skin? If you want to use the ice for comfort, a better way to do it, in my view, is to use a fan to blow cold air. If you got ice, put the ice in front of the fan so the air is very cold when it hits you, and that's a much better way to get some comfort and relief for the skin if it's burning a little bit, rather than putting the ice directly on and reducing the blood flow to the area that needs blood flow. When should I dermaroll in the day? This is a good question. Personally, I think in the evening. If you're someone who's very sensitive to the sun, perhaps, and some people are, if you do it in the morning, what you don't want to risk is then that sun throughout the day possibly causing a little bit of irritation. So if you do it in the evening and then you're asleep all night in the dark, you never have that risk. So typically I will always do it for myself and my patients in the evening, unless it's something like 0.2, in which case you can do it whenever because you're not breaching that DEJ. But anytime you're breaching the DEJ and you go deeper, I would always suggest doing the evening if possible. And I think that's all the questions. Yeah. So there's a lot of information there. Please understand that that's not going to answer every single question on microneedling. So if you do have one that hasn't been answered, genuinely put it in the comments, because I'll probably make another video answering all of those questions as well, and then putting that out for you guys too. But like I said, if you want to learn things like this, I do have that online school group where we go through all sorts of cosmetic treatments. We help people pick the right cosmetic treatments for them as well. People go on these journeys where we see them over the months improve. They post their pictures, and it's a very supportive community. So link for that is in the description down below, and hopefully I'll see you in there. Thank you for watching.